to connect with them. So if you want to join us, just send me an email, or you go on the Smart Cities EUTech. You just send me an email, or you can just send me to the public chat, and also you have this link on LinkedIn, and also the email. So thank you for allowing me to make this presentation. Now we will go back to our panelists today. I think we lose Said. Said, we can't see you, but it's okay. I will present you, and try to fix your camera so we can people can see you. Okay. So let's first introduce Patricia Monte. Nice to have you here, Patricia. Patricia empathize, inspire, and stimulate change on an individual and societal level. To the use of word entrepreneurship, she has over 8 years of experience leading a GovTech company in the healthcare sector. Her ultimate goal is to ensure that everyone has access to health and care. This is the only possible with a strong technological layer between healthcare policymakers, healthcare professionals, and citizens, local or foreign. She's currently part of the advisory board of Dell Women Entrepreneur Network and has several roles in the UIHC 2030 program of WHO. In the beginning of her career, she led 8-figure programs for Philips and Office Depot across Europe. It's a real pleasure to have you here, Patricia. Now let's go to our second panelist, Mr. Paul Elungat. He's an experienced business development leader in digital transformation who leads from the front to confidentially explore the art of the possible. An innovative product tactician with expertise in digital transformation, he begins by understanding the problems, followed by the creation of projects, vision, strategy, and roadmap. Naturally, these involve identifying and mapping opportunities while mitigating business risk, all while aligning with the corporate strategic direction. Paul is a graduate electrical engineer from the Technical University of Kenya. He has been in the industry for over 2 decades, and he has a great background on telecommunication, carrier business edge, computing and cloud solution, Microsoft Azure, and Supermicro cloud system. He has pioneered entry of Cisco and Fortinet in the East African market and has a well grasp of Cisco and IBM systems. Being a pioneer, he has introduced IoThings platform on IoT and simple hardware devices into the African market, and currently looking forward to doing the same in other markets around the world. He's an advocate and the EUTech and also belong to ITU working group of connecting the unconnected. Nice to have you, Paul, today. I will go with my last panelist. I will go with Said Sesay. As a skilled engineer and entrepreneur, he has assisted governments and Fortune 500 companies around the world in understanding and delivering secure, highly reliability computing and electronic information system. His current focus is on the design, implement, and deploy of automate sensor data capture and analytics solution for industrial IoT projects, specializing in secure edge to anywhere, electronic transaction processing for cloud and big data solution. So we have a very technical panel today. It's great to have you. Now I will give the floor to Patricia to start her presentation, but before that I will give you the keys of the house. Patricia, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
So, Thank you, Frederick, for having us today to discuss this very important topic, which is about ethics, rights, and inclusion. But I tend to say, and that's something we talked about a lot in the healthcare space, that we should talk about leaving no one behind when we discuss inclusion ultimately. And I will explain why I'm talking about leaving no one behind later. So, good morning, Paul. Good morning, Saeed. Pleasure to have you together. And as we all three know, you will pick up each of the topics along the way. I'm gonna give you all the viewers, to whom I say as well good morning, a kind of a glossary on what's happening in the inclusion space when it comes to for a smart city. But we gotta realize that the whole topic of ethics, right? It's something that started from the beginning of humanity. It's something we took along when we talk of human case. We need to think of ethics, rights, but what does it actually mean? That's what we're going to try to answer here. Why do we need it to really talk about leaving no one behind? What does it entail? And how do we make it happen? So I'm going to try to cover it from an inclusion point of view, and later we're going to go into ethics and rights with the support of Paul and Said. So moving forward, it is important that we put first the context, and I think I've tried to highlight it when I was doing the introduction. We got into the fourth industrial revolution around the beginning of the 21st century. And that meant, like I mentioned, that the humanity went through a crazy process. How do we challenge all pillars of our society because of the entry into the 21st century? And that's something we're going to look into mainly from an ethical point of view, mainly from a rights point of view, which is a law related, and from an inclusion point of view. So how can we not let anyone behind, talking about rural area, gender, LGBTQ rights? How do we make sure everybody is included and feel part of this new world and of this new game? So it is important to also realize, because the topic was ethics, rights, and inclusion, that for us, for me, inclusion is the overall pillar covering all of it, because you have ethics, you have rights, and you have many other pillars, which I'm going to highlight it, being part of that inclusion. We tend to hear inclusion from a race point of view, but it covers much more. Now, at the ethical level, we need to understand that ethics and rights, it's quite a confusing word, but at the end of the day, it's about moral. What are the principles that we have within our society, codes that are not spoken, rights or wrongs that we give to our kids from a cultural point of view, that govern our behavior and the conduct of our activity? Because it's going to be critical on how we design our technology, and we see it within the GovTech space. We see it in the AI. I think it's been a topic we've discussed a lot. Now that we're giving the power to the robots and that we're teaching them the way we think, the way we behave, think about it. Pause for a second. What do we want to teach those machines? Because once we've let the journey out from the machine point of view, we can't stop them. How much we train them, because at least a human being, you can put them in prison, you can send them to therapists to try to adapt things. How do you deal with that when you've gone as far as we've seen the monster of Facebook that we can't control anymore? The monster of Instagram, we see the impact it has on the mental health, which is a program we've run with the Dutch government recently on how do we spot and help the kids when they're starting to go overboard in the Instagram from a mental health point of view. And that's because there is a monster that has been created there through the machine. So as a result, we need to define standards and values that govern our action. But who should define those? Who? In this world where almost everything happens bottom up, and I think I'm going to touch upon that later. I'm a strong believer that bottom up approach that the digital world is stimulating has its good side from a political point of view. It is giving back the power to the society. But where is the government, policymakers? Where are they left? How do we make sure that when it's happening up bottom up, it's happening in the right way, with the right values? And who defines the values? Where are the boundaries? Is it a global program? Is it approached from a global point of view? Is it national wide? Another topic that we will address. So let's park a bit the topic of inclusion and overall ethics and rights, and go into the digital transformation, because I think Frederick highlighted that we are looking at it from a context of the transition we are doing digitally, which for me is all about the fourth industrial revolution. Within the spectrum of the fourth industrial revolution, we see steps that countries are making, being at different stages. Some are still at the digital information level, some others at the organization of information, but a lot of countries are already at the step of the transforming the institution. Yesterday, I was talking with a group of ladies looking into security for the G7 meeting in Japan, and they were very, very worried about security when it comes to smart cities. But only the Japan can talk about this, the US type of countries. But we need to remember, and that's why I keep bringing up the leaving no one behind. There are parts of the world, and my company works with some of those that are still at the digitalized of just the information. I'm sure Paul can also touch upon that, because around Kenya, you've probably seen some of those cases. When we do discussion, we shouldn't forget them first at the global level, but locally, they need to realize that they need to also have those discussions. So what does it mean, the transforming of the institution? At which level do we stand? This is just a one overview of what it's meant, and I'm sure it gives a broad vision of where we should be. Many predict by 2030, we should have our smartphone kind of helping us navigate our cities, our countries. What does it imply in terms of values? Are we going to have an alternative world? We are talking about Web3. How much security sits there? Privacy, values, ethics. Where is the boundary? Who sets that? Still a big discussion. We are at the EU Tech Year. I'm sure among the viewers, we have policymakers, because this platform is for them. It is a challenging topic to pick up. This is just another view of the whole story of smart cities. It's going to be healthcare, it's going to be housing, it's going to be cars. We see them happening at this stage. But my biggest fear, and that's an observation we see as a company, we're doing it bottom up today. We don't always involve government. Okay, for companies like ours, because we do GovTech, we work directly with them. But there are loads of other youngsters doing it from a bottom-up approach. How do we control all those journeys in the box? Who sets the boundaries? When do we set those boundaries? Because it feels like governments, policymakers are running after the facts when we look at the way the digital world and the digital transformation is happening. Yes, there are decisions slowly being made, acts being created, but we're a bit late with the game. I wanted to take some time and talk about the universal health coverage, because in the smart city, one of the important pillars, it's not more important than the others, but it's a critical pillar. It's about healthcare. And COVID taught us that we need to rethink our healthcare. In the developed world, it looked like as it was already perfect, but COVID reminded us that the world has evolved tremendously. We had interesting things, but they need to be pumped again. And again, like Frederick highlighted, as a big believer of technology, I strongly believe technology is going to be very critical to support the gaps that exist. And that gap exists in the emerging globe, with whom we've worked a lot, but it also exists in the developed world, because the funding, the governments can't keep up with the funding anymore. Healthcare is extremely expensive. How do we make it leaner? What do we put in place to cover the human resources and the healthcare resources not fully available anymore, because they're tired from working very hard, because COVID put the pressure on them. What if a new pandemic happens? How are we going to deal with that? So that's what we do as a company, doing it at the nation level, where we try to help them look into their processes, restructure the processes, and again, put a layer of technology in order to support the existing capital resources, human resources, infrastructure. We also ultimately strongly believe that healthcare will happen at home in the future. We're not going to go extensively further into it, but this is just to show you from a one pillar point of view, from a one industry point of view, that at smart city level, a lot is happening already. And I mentioned it in the beginning, healthcare, every day we're talking about leaving no one behind. So when we're designing, there's always a big question on the table. What about the ones that can't pay the bills? What about the ones that are chronically ill? What about the kids? What about the migrants that don't have, that are undocumented? These are things, and anyone wanting to have access to those documents, it's been discussed at EU level, it's been discussed at WHO level, it's been discussed at couple of the countries where we've done work in the emerging globe level. So from a healthcare point of view, it's highly on the table. How do we make sure everybody is included? It doesn't always mean that the answers are there, but it's being addressed, it's being discussed, it's being put on the table. Now, from a smart city point of view, we need to look at it from all those perspectives and angles, from all those industries. Are we thinking about that? Are we incorporating all of this? Now, the next question is, who is driving those discussions? And we had an initial debate among the panelists, and one of our conclusions were two critical pillars we've seen that should drive these discussions. It's going to be, it should happen at global level, meaning UN and so forth, but it will need to happen country-wise. Why? Because we stand at different stages of our transformation. We have different values, different cultures. We won't accept to see certain things passing in front of our kids based on where we stand. We need to keep that in mind. But what impact would it have when the decisions are taken locally and the company sits globally, just like Facebook, that could be part of this game in the future? That's why they're making a step into Web3. The other important pillar where we believe the conversation will need to happen is at the generation level. Because as a company, what we've observed is when we have decision makers that are boomers, the discussion is so different from the ones that are Gen Z, or when you're chatting with a Gen A. So discussion will happen at those different levels, and somehow from a bottom point of view, it is already happening. But ultimately, in order to close my opening statement, what we see, what we've observed, and I do believe my panelists, my co-panelists will agree with me, digital transformation is happening highly from a bottom-up point of view. The perfect world will require that there is also a top-down approach, and I'm going to leave you with my thought-provoking statement. I strongly believe, because of the transition we're going through with the digital, with the fourth industrial revolution, governments might not exist in the future. We still need policymakers. We need to craft this documentation to set the pace, to see what's happening in the conversation at digital level. Blockchain will be a big replacer, and I strongly believe in blockchain will help us to keep an eye on all the things happening in the different startup garages, all the things that are being created that are driving the way of living of our future generation. Because the discussion we're having now, it's not about the boomers anymore. They are almost all dying. It's about the Gen Z, it's about the Gen A, it's about the generation after. And these are guys that were born with, I can put my life out there. I don't really care about privacy. And they don't really care about governments anymore neither. So how much will blockchain play a critical role in making sure that we can keep the genie in the box, policymakers can do their part of the game and bring it back into the game for the youngsters and for the society, so we can drive properly what needs to be driven, so no one is left behind, but that we also have a population and a society that's extremely happy and, supporting everything that's going on around us. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll give you back the word, Frederick.
Wow, amazing presentation, because I feel like you are questioning all the way we are dealing with the government and how our society goes, and you are like very that's very interesting, because I understand that somehow, some way, we will have to question everything to deal with the ethics, to deal with the transition, digital transition, and to make it more understandable for everyone. And also, maybe we need to change a lot to make it work. So now I will go with Paul because Paul, I have a question for you, a very interesting question for you, Paul. So, what do we have to bring into the consideration when we talk about rights in smart cities, Paul?
Thank you, Frederick and Patricia, for the wonderful presentation that you've just done. Many things come to mind as when you're talking about rights, because rights is a broad subject. It talks about morality, correctness, just, or something honorable that needs to be done in a given context. And given that we are in a world of technology, there are many things to be considered. The smart city in itself is not, uh, let's say, prohibitive per se, but how we use it uh, makes us to have some decisions that have to be looked looked into, adjusted, or modified in our mode of operation when you are talking about smart cities. Because when you're talking of smart cities, you are talking of data essentially, and that is where the truth of the matter is. Because we are talking of smart city, we are talking of data, that and how well we make use of data that we capture within the smart city is what now helps us to identify what ethics, what rights have to be placed with the increasing emergence of technology. So, quickly, what I can say is, for instance, the data that you're talking of from the smart cities comes from utilities and companies that uh, uh, we we work with, maybe the electric company, gas company, water, name it. We have data originating from the transport for purpose of identifying movement and locations. So mobile operators have their data, name it. The list is long. Travel and accommodation, social media, the photos that are there. So what is paramount for us in the area of having proper governance? I think the right word is, what governance do we need to have in the smart cities to be able to help us not to breach whether an individual, an entity, a nation, or a region in the globe, so to speak. Uh, Now that we should be able to localize this to either local governments, municipalities, countries, regions, the EU, name it, the AU, or any other entity that is responsible of governance. So they have a great input when it comes to the determination of the rights of those who live in their cities and what is being done, because governance cannot be left out. And when you are talking of smart cities, you are not talking about technology or technologists per se, or people in the technology industry. No, we are talking of key decision makers, and the other people that we who may not be left behind are people in legislation, because the legislators also have a key stake in what is happening in the cities, because after uh, drafting bills that may be taken to the respective parliaments, they also need to have an understanding of what is happening in the smart cities. Similarly, the same to policymakers that are going to make decisions either in the local government or regional level, so to speak. And then after that has been done, then the all those people in governance, people in legislation and policymakers hand that document, if one is there, to the implementers. Now, that is the section of ICT and cybersecurity, because these are now the people who tie the bolts and the nuts down on the ground. They need to have guidance. And again, if I may ask, do we need technology gurus to become lawyers, or lawyers to turn into techies so that they can have proper legislation? I'm just throwing a question. I'm not sure who should drive towards which direction. Is it the legal practitioners who should become tech savvy, or the tech savvy people should know about legal practice so that can help in the decision making process when it comes to drafting of these legislation, policies, name it? As we may be aware that since smart city is a relatively an emerging technology, there may be few nations or governments that have taken in consideration to have things to do with smart cities, and that also makes the process slightly a bit dragging, because there are no many points of reference. Because I think if I'm not wrong, just early this year, there was a bill of rights on AI from the US government. UK was trying to do something as of last year on IoT in terms of legislation. I don't know how far that may have reached. There is no mention or priority in some African countries on smart city development. You get the disparity. So how do we bring all of us together to understand the importance or the viability of what you're talking about in terms of ethics, rights, and values and inclusion with respect to ethics and rights on smart cities? Again, if I may just try to move on, and maybe my colleague Sahid may give an issue on ethics. We know that ethics vary from place to place and from city to city. Not every city is similar to the other. So there could be some kind of conflict of interest, because the technology providers are interested in selling their technology, yet the masses down there have a specific need that they need to be addressed by the technology. So if these two are not brought in tandem, the technology providers and the end users, then there can be a gap in terms of policy driving and things like that. There are players in the industry who are currently drafting, let me say, smart cities information systems that may guide the industry, yet they themselves are also competitors in the same space. Could we have maybe an entity that specifically looks, for instance, the way we are having maybe the EU tech looking at issues with technology within the EU? Could we also be having something specifically within the EU that targets policies on smart cities, so to speak? There are other entities like the ITU that is talking about AI, cybersecurity. Could the same also be addressed by such entities? And again, moving forward, the issue of smart cities initiatives, threats that may be visiting the city are devoid of historical, spatial, cultural significance, because, for instance, let's take as for instance a smart city, a city like New York and a city maybe like Nairobi. The requirements may be different for specific reason. It may be a security solution, but things to be considered in New York and Nairobi may not necessarily be the same. So again, and given the economic strength of the different regions will also determine who will be included and who may not be included in terms of rights. Because right now we may talk as and say electricity is a basic necessity or water is a basic necessity. Could we come to a point and say that smart city is a basic necessity to the masses that are moving towards the city? As we may be aware that in the year 2030, the urban population, 2/3 of the urban population will be migrating to the cities. And how are we going to have that being managed effectively without breaches of any kind? Yeah, either or to individuals, to entities, or to corporates, so to speak. So,
Paul,
and then
you have 1 minute left. Please.
yeah, sorry, I'm saying this because
Okay,
there
okay.
are many things.
Yeah, just to
Yeah.
remind you.
Yeah, thank you, Frederick. I'm just winding up. Issues of economic pressures will also determine how well the inclusion will be done, the rights and the ethics will be handled. So maybe because of time, I allow me to pause there, but we can I'll put my contacts on the chat, then we can engage further if there's need be. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for this great presentation. I understand that you have the same question as you are putting on the scene. The same problematic that Patricia put is about governance. It's about how do we deal with different parts of the world when it comes to ethics. So it's very, very interesting. So before I give the floor to Said, don't forget, because I see one hand raised, don't forget that you can put your question in the chat and the panelists can answer this there. So feel free to use the chat. And I'm going to thank you because in some of countries, it's non-working days, but you show up for this panel. So it's very, very, we are very, very thankful. And now, Sahid, I will go with you. I have one question for you, Sahid. One question: how do we determine what is ethical in technology usage? The floor is yours, Said.
Well, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Frederick?
Yes, very well.
Yes, okay. So, ethics in technology, that's a big one, huh? Because I'll just start by saying, we, being a technology person, we talk about three wears, okay? Software, hardware, humanware, okay? So the hardware is going to consume same amount of electricity, or you flick the switch, it goes on, you flick the switch, it goes off, it's going to pass the data. Software is going to do, if there are no bugs, of course, it's going to do the same thing over and over. So the main variable in all that relationship is the humanware, which again has so many other inputs into it: socioeconomic, regulations, laws, culture, values, norms that dictate how the humanware interfaces with technology. Technology meaning the hardware, the software. And even when I say hardware, consider a shovel that you use to dig on the field is also hardware. Okay, so how do you use a shovel? How do you use a computer? Now roll it back to the biggest part of it, or the humanware. Um, Ethics, culture, values, norms determine how we interface with hardware and software technology, basically. And these vary across. The variance is so huge. It's even getting bigger today. Before, you used to have people in one country having a similar culture. Today, even people in a small town, they have different cultures. It's varying across generations. Oh. Uh, can you hear me, Paul?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
But we can see
Okay,
you.
sorry.
We
I
can
think
see you. Yes.
okay, there was a little break there. I'm sorry. I'm in the countryside, so
Okay,
there's a little bit of issue
go
with
ahead. Go ahead. Just
communication. Yeah,
explain. Try to fix your camera. Oh, you are back. Amazing. So you can
yeah.
go.
Okay, yeah, it's back. So yeah.
Great.
So the what I'm talking about is the variation among people today, generational age, which is generational, of course, tribes, our cultures, our values and norms, as such that uh, it comes down to interfacing with technology. You cannot really rely on the ethics because that's all varying based on all the various inputs. So it brings us to laws, okay, the regulations that can be put into place to guide us all, you know, it's where it's at. And then when you talk about regulations, as Patricia said earlier, everything, and Paul also mentioned, it comes down to the data that matter. So um, you make the regulations based on the data that's available, the usage of the data, right? And then that leads into the inclusion aspect of things. You see, so I give you an example. When I did some work in the early days of .com, uh, we were putting intranets together, and some guys were saying, "Oh, you can follow somebody across the websites." And I was like, no, you can't do that. He said, oh, yes, we can. I said, well, yes, we can, but we cannot, you know. And the difference was in our cultures. And I said, okay, if we're going to have to follow somebody, we have to put a sign to say we are following you. So I was coming from a privacy angle, but the other technology person, their culture did not dictate that sort of privacy. So they were going to go ahead and do it anyway. They don't have to tell somebody they're following you, they're tracking you. So they will have a lot of tracking going on, the use of the data. We don't even know what is used, who is using it, how it's used, you know. As Paul indicated, regulations are definitely required to guide us all on the capturing of the data, the usage of the data, and when that is done, the proper usage of the data will then bring about inclusion. And blockchain gives a lot of good evidence of the data tracing to facilitate inclusion. So I cannot then make a decision based on culture, geography, or association when the data that you have at hand actually dictates that the decision should be different. That is the real goal, and it's going to be helping towards the inclusion factor. Again, summarily, ethics, culture, norms, values are today of not that much usage. Regulations are going to be the way to go. And to get the regulations, the data captured, used, utilized uh, properly, we then guide all of the above, basically. In terms of, if you mentioned the use of ethics in technology, I would like to say um, is that the the data will determine eventually the usage, and that will guide the regulators, the lawmakers, the codes around the usage of the data, the capture and the usage of the data. I'd like to revert back to you, Frederick. If we have questions from the floor, we can deal with them specifically.
Great, great. Thank you for this presentation. Thank you for this word. We still have time. I will go back to Patricia because I have a question for her. Patricia, what is the status of healthcare when it comes to smart cities? Patricia, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So if we look at it solely from a smart city point of view, I'm not sure if healthcare is really hooking into the discussion of smart city per se, but there's something happening on the healthcare vertical at global level. So if we look at it from the perspective of the UN Sustainable Development Goals that were created, the Development Goal 3 is, everything about healthcare. And one of the critical components there is SDG 3.8. which is also what our company drives, it's all about universal health coverage. You have other 3 points, but they tend to be small components for me of the 3.8, because 3.8 is about how do we ensure access to care for all? How do we make it happen? So from a UN point of view, having set that agenda since 2012, there were slowly, and I launched my company in 2013. So I was very close to many of those discussions. At the global level, through the SDG 3, a lot of those policymakers were getting together. I started being invited as a tech company in those discussions. It was to hear the voice on how do we make it happen. And to be honest, at that time, no one had a clue. We were sitting, but we didn't really know in which direction we should go. What I've observed, having been part of the evolution of the discussion, around 2018, the pillars were starting to be clarified. A private sector came together with NGOs were invited, a representative of the civil society were invited, government officials started being invited into the discussion, and we were coming together under the UHC 2030 you highlighted, Frederick, that I'm part of in the board. There, the WHO did its part together with the WEF to get and harness the different energy around the topic. And we created a document which we had signed by all governments across the globe, which was a kind of a sealing document by 2030. And that document was signed at the UN event of 2019, September 2019, if I'm not mistaken, where they were promising from an ethical, from access to all, from making available the money, the World Bank for making available the money, that by 2030, we should have the 8 billion people, because by the way, I think since last month, we had our 8 billion born child. 8 billion people will have access to care, whether they have the money, they don't have the money, they're chronically ill or they're not chronically ill. So the discussion has been happening between the 2012, driven by the UN SDG agenda, and slowly now through the WHO program again, we are pushing it into countries. And this is where private sector comes in, because as a tech company, together with a company like Philips or GE or Medtronic, we are now picking different countries, having agreements with them and contracts, and we are helping them in going through the process of making it happen. That's how healthcare organized it. Now, it is slowly hooking up into the smart city, but often healthcare tends to, how am I going to put it? They look at smart city discussion like mundane questions, because healthcare is really about people. It's, you have to save life. So they tend to be on the side, but we are hooking up, and I'm highlighting that because in 2021, I joined the discussion of global, they have this city, the how do you call it again? All the city, the mayors, they have a group and a community, global community. I think they recently met in Japan. We spoke there. I spoke there to explain to them how they should make sure that the healthcare initiative is hooked into their city program. So it's slowly happening, but initially it wasn't done together with the group driving of a smart city in countries. That's my story. So back to you, Frederick.
Thank you for this complete answer. I have a question from the public, from Seon Ni Ho. To find the optimum between control and the citizen freedom is the critical point, but it differs each culture, society, etc. So it's difficult to have globally, isn't it? Who feel to answer this question? Paul, I see you. Yeah, okay, let's go, Paul. You can go for that. Thank you.
Yes, okay. It is a fairly a challenging issue because not all cultures are the same, and just as policies or legislation is guided by what may have transpired, because we cannot say that you make a legislation in a city, maybe, let's say, for example, an arbitrary example, where theft has not occurred. Yes, you cannot say we'll jail someone for 3 years for breaking into someone's house. Yet that breach has not necessarily taken place. So how do people in smart cities, for instance, say we anticipate that there will be a breach on the images that will be captured in our streets and pass legislation before an incident has occurred? You get the the dynamism of the situation, because that is where the challenge is, and that will depend per region or per country or per particular locality, so that they can actually address their challenges and issues with respect to their given context.
Okay.
I hope that answers. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. I will go to Patricia. Now she has to say something.
Yeah, so on that topic, Ro, the one way I want you to look at it, I don't per se know you. Think about global corporate companies. Often they roll out global programs saying everybody will function the same way. We have process design and define, so everybody should follow. And we're talking about company level. They never go beyond. I think the biggest company has 500,000 people, maybe Amazon, something like that. They never succeed to have everybody working the same way. If at company level, deploying processes that should be used the same way cannot happen, forget about the global implementation of culture, of way of thinking, of way of looking at life and at the world. So I think it's never going to happen. What nevertheless I believe should happen, back to my story of government in the long run will not exist. The moment we will learn as society to feel uncomfortable and let the society voice where they feel the pain, we will then be able to notice the same pain is identified in Argentina. I think it's Camelo that is from Argentina, in Cameroon, and in this. And then maybe we will have policymakers coming together, or a type of board that will be created to look at the issue cross continent and come up with an ultimate solution that should, kind of benefit everybody, with the ultimate goal that it can be repeated when that pain starts being voiced by other parts of the world. That for me would be long run a bit where we could potentially go, but aiming for global implementation of stuff, I don't think it will work. But trying to aim for the bottom up, telling us where they feel the pain, and together with them designing the solution, whether they sit in Cameroon versus in Asia, I think it will be possible if we know how to organize and create a collaboration platform. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have like 5, 6, 7 minutes left. So Saeed, I will give you the floor so you can go briefly with your answer, please.
Yes, quickly speaking, like Paul said, you cannot preempt, a crime. But these days they talk about stochastic probabilities of activities taking place, and we have to start looking at those, wherein you can preempt certain activities, especially if people are running their mouth on social media, making threatening remarks, and there's a possibility it can happen, so you can question them. You don't wait for it to happen anymore. That's one aspect. But as Patricia says, hopefully one day we'll get a global global entity to regulate. The UN is there. They have tried financially. World Bank, IMF, they're all there. They've tried. They all have interest, and all these organizations have specific sub agendas that people believe, and the influencers in these organizations also dictate what really goes down at the end of the day. But I just one word to say about it all is that the difference in culture, ethics, and norms especially like our view about privacy. You know, a guy sitting in a basement who thinks that he can hack into somebody's server, right? With no more moral compass, no thought process that I should not be doing this. It's very different from another kid who's sitting somewhere who is saying, "Oh yeah, we cannot do this. It's not right." You know. So how do you cross those across boundaries, across cultures? As is still out there, basically, you know. And even international global regulations and laws, I'm not sure are going to be able to compound that. Data, at the end of the day, data could be able to show people that, hey, you've done this, it's not right, this is the damage you've caused, you know, except of course you have criminal intent to start with. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Thanks, Frederick.
Thank you, Saeed. I see one more question, but we will not take it because we have like 4 minutes to go. So I will just make a brief conclusion about what was saying. We have the difficulties to make ethics, to make all that inclusion global because of due to generations. Like Patricia said, we have the boomers, we have the Generation Z. So how do we manage to make it work? Because all these generations have different views. We also have the difficulties to make it onto space. I'm talking about space in different countries. There is not the ethics is not the same in Cameroon, like Patricia said, in Argentina, in France, or in US. So how we make it more global when we talk about where in the country where we have to apply this. We also have the political interest because sometimes politicians or policymakers don't go far as we need them to go because due to agenda, due to different issues that they are dealing with, they can't go straight to that point to make it more ethical to protect data of the people. I think this lead us to what we can call education, because I think now we have to educate young generation about the importance of data privacy and also the importance of how to use it carefully. And the next generation of decision maker will be able to more understand what it's about and how we're dealing with and how to protect the society of the when you have an enterprise that wants to go far and use your data in not a good way. We have to have educate people from the next generation that will deal with all that. So I want to thank you all for this. I want to thank the panelists, Patricia, Paul, Saeed. Looking forward to work with you guys because this is only a webinar, but we have a lot of things to do together. I was talking about position papers before that we have in New Tech. I was talking about white papers. I would be very happy if you can collaborate with us in this process because we have to deliver soon. So I need your ideas on smart cities. I want to thank also the audience that was a bit shy at the beginning, not one tape on public chat, but when the conversation goes on, they start to feel better and start to tape. So thank you for coming today. I know for some of you it's a holiday. I want just to present to you guys. Let me just go on if I can. Just 1 second. It's the 3 certificates that I will share with I will just take one example of the 3 certificates for just 1 second. I hope it is charged. Okay, so this is the 3 certificates. I don't know if you can see. You will see it. So I just took for Saeed example, but Patricia and Paul will receive the 3 certificates for coming here today, and also the participant might receive. I don't know if you already put it, but you receive the letter of recommendation, something that say that you attended to that panel today, and you have knowledge now. You understand more the inclusion. So thank you, guys. It was a wonderful panel, and looking forward to talk to you soon. And also the people that come today, I will invite you to our networking event so we can continue to discuss with the panelists. So thank you everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye now.